the New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain, and nice to be with Tim Warren.
Again.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Maybe you can remind listeners, it's been a little while since we've had you on the NZ Tech Podcast, sort of where you fit into this big wide world of tech and startups in New Zealand.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the last time we spoke was February 2020, before everything went crazy. So it's good to be back and feel slightly normal. So what Ambit do is customer service at scale with digital employees, and most people know them as chatbots. But I think if the pandemic proved one thing, it would be that you can't always rely on people being able to be somewhere at some particular time. And so businesses increasingly are looking to avail themselves of services like ours, which is quite exciting. So it's a big growth time for us at the moment.
Oh, it's really, really pleasing. It's always good to sort of tap in after a little bit of time with startups and see how things have progressed. So definitely looking forward to to doing that later on in the show. We'll delve into some of the tech news and so on first. But before we do that, just want to say or share our appreciation for our show partners who keep the NZ Tech Podcast going and on air. So big thank you to Vodafone, 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, Gorilla Technology, and Deal for their support of the show and of the broader tech and innovation ecosystems here in New Zealand. Well, let's get into the news. Last week we were talking a little bit around the role of AI, kind of taking over. In this case, I think it was is it James Earl Jones, if I've got his name right, the voice of Darth Vader.
Voice of Vader.
And so Vader sort of going AI. And then in the last few days, we've heard about Bruce Willis, and the news item was basically saying, he had sold the rights to his face, his likeness, and he had appeared. We're seeing online a Russian ad being voiced by somebody else, but it appeared as though it was Bruce Willis. Now, Bruce Willis's time in his life and wellness, where his career appears to be over, and so to a degree that sort of stacked up, right? If you're no longer able to act, voice, work, etc., and that's been an income stream for you.
He's probably pretty happy, right?
Right. Then would that work? Now, the latest thing I saw from and I watched this video, which it was sort of deep fake, so it was all computer generated, and the feedback that BBC were reporting was that his agent says no, he hasn't actually sold the rights to his face. So who knows what's going on, and that ability to, look, I need to get some publicity for my business. Let's get whichever celebrity, fire up some software, and we've got whoever, selling and promoting our brand. Now, we see this. I walked through the mall, St. Luke's over the weekend, and as I'm walking through, I walked past a hairdresser, right, and in the window. It's just a one-off hairdresser. They're not a big brand or anything, but in the window was sort of 3 pictures, and one of them's a celebrity. And I'm
Wouldn't
thinking,
be Bruce Willis.
It wasn't Bruce Willis.
No, he doesn't have enough hair for a hairdresser.
Not quite enough on top for a hairdresser, but I don't know if you're promoting skull caps or whatever. I don't know, something else.
Maybe a shave.
Yeah, shaved heads. But anyway. So that there's a degree to which, and we see those a lot of these sort of fake ads that come up as well that are, take some celebrity and just slap their face on it. This stuff it's going to become like that, isn't it? We're actually going to have the videos as the technology, improves and becomes more and more accessible.
Yeah.
and that could be exactly what's happened in this Bruce Willis case, based on based on the feedback from his agent, quite
Yeah,
possibly,
it
right?
could well
And
be.
you're not going to be able to control it if someone runs up an ad and it especially if it's very, very targeted at an audience. There's a whole sort of next level of what you can do with that. We've already heard about the voice side of it being used in cybersecurity type scams, rather than an email from your CEO saying, put this money into this account.
Yeah,
You
voicemail.
got Tim Warren, calling you and
Oh, they
saying,
just laugh,
hey,
Paul.
hey, accountant, put this cash through. And
They don't trust me with any passwords, so yeah. No, that's right. There's a lot of areas where technology is going to get into that and change it significantly. But I think AI is just the latest kind of marketing term that people use. If you remember back about 20 years ago, there were these Coke ads, and they brought back Frank Sinatra and a few other people, and they had current people dancing with people from the 50s. And we've just got a new term for how it's done now. And the risk is probably the accessibility to people who are a bit more nefarious. So maybe people who have bad things in mind, or maybe just potentially profit, where they're essentially, it's really just copying brand, and that's been done for a long time. So it's another version of copying brand, be it Bruce Willis or a fake Barbie doll. It's the same thing.
Yep. Yeah, I remember, walking along the beach in India, Goa, and there's a big, golden arches or something or other logo that's completely disconnected from, there's not a, whatever the brand was, there was nothing to represent them other than the logo, and of course attracted attention. And so there's so many different ways people, would fake stuff. The other one that had some media attention was with Mandalorian and deepfake technology being used there in order to bring back a young Luke Skywalker. And before the show, you were talking about, hey, for how many, forever we've kind of had young people that you maybe want to, cover them over a period of time,
give them fake
on a
wrinkles, and yeah. So now it's just winding it back, and I guess
reverse.
it's one thing to wind back the look and skin, but if you can make someone shorter and then into a whole different age bracket, that's quite different. But I like to think of it from the positive side. Yeah, maybe you can pretend to be something, but these are digital actors, right? And as we were mentioning, digital twins of a famous actor able to do things that that you wouldn't otherwise be able to achieve, which I think is positive. The question is, do they actually need to be related to an underlying person, or will they be entirely digital with no actual human behind it? And that'll be a new world, and it's very close. Not just toy world stuff here.
Yeah. Well, I guess that we've had some elements of that, but yeah, will the big new star of 2023 or 2025
be a digital influencer?
Be someone who's not really someone in the
could
usual
save some money
in
on
the usual
sponsorship.
sense, right?
A digital Federer, So.
So look, I think we've got some fascinating times ahead, but we do need to look at these other aspects and how can you manage them appropriately or not. Some of these things, there's not going to be a level of control. And I was on a call with Meta late last week, a sort of media call, and they're wanting to share a little bit of sort of story on on the algorithms and the work they've been doing over the last sort of 3 years, the Christchurch call and so on. And look, the the stats they were sharing in terms of some of the things that they've been trying to address. We're encouraging in terms of the technology development, and they were able to stop some of the worst stuff much more effectively than what they were 3 years ago. But the reality still remains that you can't stop everything bad that goes on
the
online, just
unregulated
as
use
you
of
can't in the physical world, right? It's like
the unregulated use of technology will always precede the regulated use by definition, right? So you're always going to have people pushing the boundaries, and sometimes those will be creative and positive. Sometimes, unfortunately, they'll be negative. Live streaming when it first came out, and remember, people have been trying to do this through digital means, through phones since the 90s. Unfortunately, everyone realised it was really now possible on a global scale through the worst of means, but that we will always see a challenge on that front. One of the things we could think about potentially is with the concept of NFTs, where you can digitally sign certain technologies, perhaps that can be used in a good way to wrap a level of protection or privacy around certain technologies or digital images or otherwise known as fakes. Can we actually make them genuine, authentic? So I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, prove. Yeah,
Mm.
but I guess there's a level to which, a lot of times, people aren't going to care or go to that sort of same level in the same way people get, they get an email from a fake CEO or something, right? It's like, oh, yep, that looks like an email from Tim Warren. He's asked me to pay that into that account. Yep, I better go ahead and do that without, even hovering over the email address to check, right? So there's a level of education. There can be those sort of levels where we can guarantee to a degree some authenticity, but how well all that stuff fits together, will be quite fascinating. I actually one of the questions that I brought up with with the team from Meta was around this was my brutal perspective on it of how can somebody set up an account that's identical to yours, the name's the same, the image is the same, and then they start inviting and adding all your friends. I was like, can't you guys just do the basics, right? And
if this equals that, then throw a question mark.
Yeah. And that was what I threw at them. Now, what they came back with, actually, we closed down. It was, some insane number of exactly that. But of course, you don't see the ones.
No one cares about the thing that hasn't happened.
That they've been successful blotting out. We only see the other ones that are like, how did this happen?
Yeah.
So they might well be getting, 99.9%, but there's this, I guess, this aspect to to your point of having some sort of verification method when, and maybe this, we get to this on some platforms where someone comes up and there's actually then this verification. Hold on, that looks like Bruce Willis, and boom, 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 and it gives like a tick like you get on on social media platforms to say,
that proof
that
of
is
identity,
this person and so on.
The proof of identity wrapped up in a digital form. While that can solve a lot of those issues, like you're talking about, the issue is that on the other side, you've got privacy, and people don't want centralized numbers. If you remember back to half your audience won't remember the 90s, but we do, and there was talk around centralizing some ID to enable some digital services that were going to be coming. And there's big resistance because people said, I don't want the hospital people knowing if I've got a driver's license or whatever that might have been. I don't tend to worry about it because I'm not doing anything in either of those places that might be a problem. But as you move towards a digital identity, it can solve that while giving away some control to a centralized agency potentially. And that's what this decentralization is working in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And there's a big move at the moment to move from this proof of work to proof of stake or proof of authenticity. And when you can combine that with some kind of identity, it's moving in the right direction. You will have seen yesterday discussion around New Zealand driver's license moving digitally. Well, I just went to the SASTA conference. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
When I arrived at SFO airport, I had the longest wait I've ever had. And that's saying something at SFO. It was over 2 hours.
Oh.
And when I went in 2019, I was able to use my digital passport. And I went through in record times, shortest time, 15 minutes in the queue. This time, it's all back to manual. Only US citizens get to use it. Well, they've brought out an upgraded digital passport, and the rest of the world don't have them.
They've got an app-based one,
an app-based
as an option, don't they?
Yeah, but it just shows it is going to go that way. And even though the US is seen as being a bit conservative on some of those technologies, it took them 15 years to pick up text, for goodness sake, SMS. So, but they've gone and they've said, hey, rest of the world, you got to catch up to us. So we need to do it, but we need to do it safely.
Yeah. It's fun how quickly these things evolve at times, and then how in other areas they can be so slow. Now, another change that's coming, Vodafone New Zealand
Yep.
have told us they are becoming One New Zealand from January or early 2023.
Yeah, I'm a long-term user here, Paul.
Yeah,
Long-term user.
yep. So what do you think that means for you as a customer? Because they've said, look, what this allows us to do is to stop throwing a whole lot of money at brand Vodafone for licensing their brand effectively, and for I guess that money sort of comes back into local market, can be spent elsewhere. Now I don't think I saw a figure on their on their press release and the info around what that was costing.
The
but,
licensing. I saw
know.
it. I've forgotten the number now,
Yeah.
but it was mind-boggling at
Yeah.
the time. So
They may have built it in with some other numbers rather than there being an exact breakdown on just the brand piece, because they're still keeping that global connection with Vodafone
and
Group.
that's
They
why
license
I'm
different things
with them, right? Because they offer such a great service there. But what have they done? Look, I mean, everyone's a brand expert at the moment, aren't they? And there's another big telco that's rebranded, and I happen to remember that Jason Paris, who's now CEO of Vodafone, becoming One NZ, he had something to do with that as well.
Right,
So,
yeah, when he was at Spark, you're right.
I've got no doubt that they will execute very well, but it's an enormous job. I've rebranded a 100-person company, and that was surprisingly large. But when you're doing something that's 30 times larger, extraordinary. But no, look, I think they'll do a great job. One thing I would say, Jason and the exec team there have been such great supporters of Tadeo across their network. Maybe a lost opportunity to delve into that, potentially be Tahi or something similar. I would worry a little bit with the brand overlap with this. You got Xero, you've got 2 degrees, you've got One News, you've got One NZ. At the moment, at the outset, there's going to be a bit of confusion. I think we'll forget about it in a while. They're different properties. I think they'll execute this, and a year from now, we'll be like, what rebrand?
Yeah.
But yeah, nice to have some green. What I know is that green and our colour, orange, work much better together than the red they used to have. So
there you go.
I applaud them for that choice, and I think that the shirt they had with the rolling into the kiwi, was a piece of brilliance.
Yeah. I'm always fascinated with things that brands do to represent themselves, and logos, and how companies are named.
I love it. I think it's a really fascinating area.
Yeah.
But simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication, right? And to have something so simple like a logo and a name, you do go through a lot of options to get there. And I bet they've done their homework and it'll research well and perform well.
Yeah. And these days, there's a lot of sort of technological, pieces to the mix when getting involved in brand stuff. And I know, they were immediately jumped on with the crossover with this One NZ. Foundation, I think it was, and and so on.
Yeah,
You've got to.
I think
got to
good
do a
on
lot
them
of
for owning the
Googling.
word.
You've got to do a lot of research.
Yeah.
You've got to make sure you can get your domain name. There's so many aspects, and sometimes they're done really poorly, even by
I'm sure they
those
saw
with
that.
a lot of specialist sort of skills. But I think already. Just their size and scale and the presence that they have, they'll totally own that. I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue for them to land at the top of Google searches. And
in fact, I read something yesterday. Some prominent reviewer whose name I've immediately forgotten said, "Good on them for taking a word back and making it useful, because we don't need to know about those fringe groups, and they're going to get lost in the search results, like you say." So again, I'm sure they'll execute that very well.
Yeah. Yep. Now, one interesting story that picked up was actually in the South China Morning Post. was around the headline read Chinese tech firms may follow DJI to cut Russia and Ukraine exposure to minimize political risk, political sanctions risk, and so on. And there were a couple of bits under this, how DJI had temporarily suspended their operations in both Russia and Ukraine because they are being accused of their products being used for military activities. And look, if you've got a situation going on like we do have now, and you make drones that can be used anywhere, and there are needs to defend a nation, you can understand why Ukrainians would be using whatever they can get their hands on, consumer or otherwise in terms of technology. Interesting that we do still have some brands that are operating in Russia and not haven't made any sort of announcements to exit, when there have been so many really big names that have just completely exited from all sorts of directions or as much as they can within reason from the big tech players, through to your McDonald's and
it's fascinating,
and so
isn't
on.
it? We've moved on from that 90s when it was very much US hegemony, collapse of the Soviet Union. China wanted to play ball because of trade. And then for a while, it looked like a repolarization back to kind of a Cold War kind of status. But I think you've seen some cracks occurring between China and Russia there. And even though they're both technologically, they've got some very good people, very smart people, and some great companies there. China's worked out maybe that with Russia not executing all that well in this so-called special operation, do they want to become part of a bipolar world where they're lumped in with Russia, or do they want to keep the trade routes open? And they'll have to make a decision pretty quickly, I would imagine. And trade usually wins out over the long term. I mean, it was a coal agreement that was put in place to stop France and Germany fighting originally. That became the EU. But no, it's something. You mentioned a fascinating stat around the level of penetration that DJI has got around that. What was the number you said?
They quoted, they said previous sanctions by the US government had seen DJI's market share, and I'm picking this as in the US, not global, fall from 80% of the drone market. I actually thought they were higher than that, closer to 90. But this is just from maybe in the last couple of years to 54%. And DJI have just been so dominant.
Well, it's the only brand you actually know
market,
of drones,
right?
isn't it?
We have talked about one or two other brands, and there are some niche ones and certain sort of commercial, industrial, and so on bases. Aeronavix, one of the drone business or startups sort of here in New Zealand. But that was complete news to me, and so we kind of don't quite realize sometimes the impact of these things, because that will be really fascinating to look at and say another 5 or 10 years time, what happened to DJI? Like, I mean, and I'm not saying that I'm not saying will it get to that point, but if we look at Huawei today, they're kind of a shadow of their former selves, certainly in terms of their role within New Zealand telecommunications. They've got some quite cool smartwatches. I mean, looking at some of their new smartwatches recently that they're somehow managing to produce, and the odd tablet, and I think they're getting into more laptops. But in terms of what we knew Huawei for, in terms of their smartphones and routers and running mobile networks in New Zealand, it's orbit disappeared. So could we be in the same boat where DJI are sort of massively displaced over the next few years? But I mean, it looks like already it's quite a big impact.
Could well be, but most people buy a drone thinking it's going to last for a good while. But if you're a Ukrainian buying a drone, that's a disposable item, right? So it completely changes the actual economy of what people are doing with drones. I'd imagine there will be an enormous market for secondary players, but where is it going to come from? I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I did notice that, and I think we probably mentioned this before. Skydio, very, very, innovative drone technologies with an ability to, I guess, do autonomous flight with really good sensing of where they're going to hit trees and different things. They've been competing with DJI in the US for a number of years, but they were at a point where you could order one, but your chance of actually getting one, because they were hand making,
Right.
1,000 a month or whatever it was initially, meant virtually nobody could get their hands on them. But they've been available in New Zealand now for. It's been about a year since they announced it in Australia and New Zealand availability, because that was purely a US only product. So that is one of the brands that could well come through and take up a slice of that market. So I probably need to have a word to them and encourage them to fly one of their drones over in this direction, so we can have a little bit
of a studio test.
Little bit of a look. Yeah. I remember busting a drone on one of our very early episodes. Parrot, French company.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I played with a drone. So, we better catch this thing. But the way it was built, actually, you didn't want to be catching it by its kind of wings, as it were.
I got to say, I always imagined drones like those little tabletop DJI things. But I saw one a couple of months ago, a full like 4K IMAX level quality one, and this thing, if this hit you, it was going to be game over. This is a 50-kilogram monster, huge camera, very, very powerful motors on it. It was quite scary, actually.
Well, think of what happens if a helicopter blade sort of thing. You get a drone coming at you with its blades. That might not be too safe, huh?
With 5 pounds of C4, it's going to be scary if you throw it at a tank. Yeah, or at your new studio. So be careful of that one, Paul.
Now we can't bypass talking about Tesla and Elon this week, and I know there's always something in the news to do with Elon. So it is another one of those weeks. But there's been sort of this big lead up to Tesla's AI Day. And I guess there's sort of been a few perspectives depending on where you're coming from. I'm interested to see, is my car finally going to be able to sort of drive itself around Auckland City
when I've had too many drinks
and so on, right? And the comment was that this FSD beta that they've had in the States for some time should be able to, or sort of along those lines of, it'll be ready to roll out internationally to markets where it's, where it fits in with the legislation and local legal frameworks. So maybe there'll be a few, folks getting driven around Auckland by the end of the year. If I had to place bets on it, I would say no, that's very unlikely.
Yeah, I think so too.
So
especially when you've got
that out there.
Was it Germany? I think the German regulators said you can't call it autopilot because it's not auto and it's not a pilot.
Yeah.
So look, Elon's excellent at generating PR, and he's one of those people that subscribes. I can't remember; it might have been Mark Twain who said the only thing worse than people talking about you is when people don't talk about you. And Elon's great at that. He's always got a way. He was going to buy his favorite social network, Twitter, wasn't he? And then he changed his mind on that. He's got a big back pocket for changing his mind. But he's brought out a few things. I remember seeing the hot swap battery that was announced, and they fawn over people at these US technology launches. It's gone nowhere, but he generated a lot of attention for a while, just enough so he could launch that Model X and sell a few 100,000. So
look, and we did know before the event that it was designed to be a recruiting event, right?
Yeah.
He's probably looking for some of the same people that you'll be looking for.
Yeah, he's welcome to give me a call. He's got my Twitter handle.
Talented engineers. So, so there was that aspect here of, is this an event that's going to show us off some really interesting sort of useful stuff or is it all there for recruiting? And look, I think as usual, as you say, he's got the attention and got some press off it. He's got that attention. The robot now.
Yeah.
What's your
I've got a
take
view
on
on
this robot?
So
That
this robot,
apparently they've thrown it together in a like this year, right?
the idea of this robot is it can drive my regular car and pick me up from the bar. I reckon the robot's already been to the bar from the way it walks, right?
There you go.
That thing is strung together.
Well,
and
one of them doesn't even walk, right? The other one had
No.
to be sort of pushed out there on a.
Their word is backstage. They were like, will it fall over? But look, Elon broke a window on his unbreakable car in front of people, and now the car's disappeared off the website. Look, he's just having a laugh. He really is. He, I've seen better things 10 years ago from high school students, and I don't want that thing driving me anywhere. But watch the rate of change, right? It's not so much important about where it is today, but let's look at where it is in 6 months. If you know those dogs that walk around, they look surprisingly evil when they open doors and walk up steps.
The Boston Dynamics kit is
Dynamics.
certainly gonna freak you out, give you a few nightmares
So
if you
now their
follow
humanoid
those thoughts.
robots. Those ones are very impressive. Have you seen that guy who's really mean to his one? It makes me quite sad,
Where
actually.
he pushes it.
He pushes it over.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, "Oh, you can't do that." Shows you how much we anthropomorphize things, right? But those really impress me. Elon could do that. He's just having some fun. He's got a few weeks until he gets he settles the Twitter lawsuit, so got to fill the gap.
Yeah, look, it is very challenging space to get into, and his approach of, look, we're not looking to make a small number of these. We want to do millions and millions of them.
Yeah.
Is a little bit like where they were with the electric vehicles, right? They started out with.
I spent 9 years, was it, telling us it was just around the corner, and everyone was like, "Oh, it's going to go bust." And then he's the highest valued automaker in the world. Doesn't make the most cars, but people attribute the highest value to it. So watch the space. He's clearly brilliant. I don't know if I'd want him to be my neighbour, or certainly not my in my family. But one of the people on our team just got one of his cars, and he seems to like it.
Yep. I definitely think that they're onto something on the vehicle side, and they're leading sort of a change across their whole sector.
Yeah, it's good on it, and it needs to happen.
How that will play out will be, I think that the next few years will be, somewhat anyone's guess in terms of exactly who the automakers are that sort of make it through intact and well. If we put aside any, and you can't really do this, but any geopolitical sort of issues, then you would imagine that the Chinese companies like BYD that have just launched here, build your dreams.
Yeah.
And Tesla will, between the Chinese brands and Tesla, you're going to see a very big share of the market in the years ahead as things move electric. But in terms of robotics, is there anyone else who's at least sort of waving a flag saying, we're going to have these things accessible, sub $20,000 US is the story. Not sure I'm believing any of that. I'm not sure whether they would ever get to the.
Well, they could be like BMW, where they're going to charge for heated seats. They're just subscription models. So I think I'll just go for a few months of cold seats. But no, look, there's a lot of change on that front. I'll tell you what, I do think we've mentioned Apple. It's hard to talk technology without talking Apple. It's the greatest technology marriage that never happened was Apple buying Tesla, because you could imagine it should have happened many times. They've got similar values, and he looks like a logical person to be. He's a kind of a next gen Steve Jobs 2.0 version. So, but anyway, I think he's got a lot of choice there. I don't know, as long as he doesn't blow himself up on the way to Mars or something like that.
Yeah, look, and there does seem to be such a close tie in between his businesses and himself.
Yeah, is it personality? People are
What if he
investing in?
gets run over by a Tesla
Well, do you make a
tomorrow,
digital twin, right?
yeah, digital
How
twin,
do you even know that it's really Elon?
that he's still
Maybe
around?
he lost that bet with the mobsters who funded the business in the first place. You know. Note to viewers, I'm not suggesting there was any involvement with mobsters there, but yeah.
Now, on to a couple of other things before we jump on to delve into Ambit. Google Stadia, their cloud-based sort of game streaming service, and not just them in the space. Microsoft have been been working pretty hard there, of course, but just in some ways, sort of a surprise that Google are closing down Stadia as a service. In some ways a surprise, in some ways not. I guess the surprise is more, going back to, Google announcing what they were doing, how common, Google Chromecast and varying other bits and pieces are within the technology that we use, and that they actually haven't been able to pull it off and, win enough market share to make it work. And it's sort of a reminder, I suppose, that a brand can be really good in one field, but doesn't necessarily mean they can wander into another and dominate, even when they're a $1 trillion odd firm with very deep pockets, right?
And yet they are Web 1.0. I mean, they're kind of the original Web 1.0 massive successes, and I think you could probably see it in a couple of ways. Either they've tried really hard and they've failed, but good on them for giving it a go. Or alternatively, maybe they did it as a defensive play, just in case they saw some other aspect of industry moving there. Maybe that's played out now and it's not going to happen and they can shut it down. So Google does have a record of doing defensive purchases where they can see a risk, much as Adobe bought Figma to make sure that they didn't lose market share there. Maybe Google saw something on the horizon. You spend a lot of money on it to make sure it doesn't happen, and then you move on. So there's plenty of, we'll get the conspiracy theorists out, plenty of squashed innovation happening around, and it could be on that. I don't know particularly, but considering how massive gaming is essentially, I heard someone say the other day, to young people, metaverse doesn't exist, it's just gaming. As you see things moving in that direction, I can see that you'd want to have a service like that. I would have kept it, but I don't have the numbers.
Now, looking at Amazon, they've had their what they call their fall hardware event. It still upsets me when these big global companies haven't learned yet that you can use a month and it's relevant to the whole world, but attaching a season which actually only is going to relate to one hemisphere and not even all of it. Bearing in mind not every country has the 4 seasons. So okay, good on you, Amazon. I think Microsoft eventually got around that. I guess Amazon will eventually figure it out, and the world's not flat and all that sort of stuff, right?
Northern centric,
But they had their event. I guess a couple of bits that stood out to me. This Kindle Scribe. So after years of e-paper, e-ink, type tech for reading books, now we've got a device coming. Haven't seen a New Zealand price. I'm picking sort of in the $500 to $600 range is where roughly where that's gonna land. 10.2-inch screen, and
So it's
a
head-to-head
magnetic stylus. So competing with the other players is Remarkable and Kobo, and I think there's probably 3 other players in that space. Remarkable probably the most well known.
Amazing how late they were to this. I mean, they invented the space, and then their only innovation was taking away the keyboard, which was useful because you had to put your Wi-Fi password in. It's what I used it for. And then they let Remarkable build a very impressive ecosystem and get onto Vision 2. And then I would have bought them, but because they've got a bit of cash. So, and then they come out with this. So, I don't know. It seems to be a little bit late, maybe a little bit like their phone, but better to try it and fail because usually they try it and it works. So,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
I mean, Remarkable seem to be sort of on a slow burn with their product. It's sort of
mm,
it's
their
improved,
price point's
but it's
extraordinarily high.
it's yeah, it's not. And even for those folks that have maybe bought into the technology, they don't always stay with it. It's not something that seems to
No.
be universally liked. But sort of back onto Amazon. So yeah, Kindle Scribe, their Echo Dots. One thing that I picked up there that was quite interesting because they've acquired a lot of brands over the years. And within that devices era where they're making announcements, they've got Eero that does the Wi-Fi, EERO, EERO, and they've got Ring. Now on the Eero side, where you have your sort of mesh Wi-Fi, they've made, I think, what is a very convenient sort of update with the newer Echo Dots, and I think this will even roll out software-wise to existing Echo Dots because those units have got wireless access in them.
Right.
Actually, the radio can be used two ways.
So they're using it as a mesh.
Yeah,
Right.
so they're
It's smart.
software update and convert your very cheap little Echo Dot device, which at times you can buy for what, $30 or
I thought
something,
some for
right?
$30 yesterday,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
the lowest price point, and clearly heavily subsidized. But do you think they're losing the smart speaker war, though?
Well, the stats they gave me, I caught up with them a few months ago, was suggesting that in the New Zealand market, that they had beaten Google, to the punch in terms of launching in the market here, and a level of personalization that sort of goes with that. That they were in, they were the front position, but it does seem to vary in sort of different markets around the world. And yeah, how that plays out. I know, some people I know were just like, they've already been destroyed. Google completely sort of own it. I guess it's little moves like this that can
You test markets,
that
right?
can help them.
And if you're a $1 trillion company, you can test markets with $1 billion, right? So that can be a big play. But I'm in this space, right? Conversational AI. I've got all of them.
Yeah.
I've got Siri, I've got Google, I've got Alexa, and I let them fight it out. And but there's a single reason why Google rises to the top, because it just works. It just works with everything. Alexa can be really good. Siri's excellent for device control for my phone, but Google talks to absolutely everything. It's free. I don't mean free, but it's open stack in terms of connecting everything to it. And every device I get, it's Google and maybe something, but it's always Google. So I've got maybe north of 100 devices in my house, and there's Google can talk to them all.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've tended to find most stuff will work with both, but yeah, there are some things that both Google and Echo, and of course things are they're opening up, and we're seeing that sort of compatibility across more things, and a bit of advancement there. Hopefully, everything kind of talks to everything, very consistently going forward, but still a few challenges with some products. Now, lastly, I'd seen the headlines: Apple slowing down on iPhone 14 production due to a lack of demand.
You double the price of your phone every time you put it out.
Well, what they said,
Tim Cook's listening.
Well, they said they kept the prices the same, right? Which is fine if you're in the US, but these are the problems I had. Was every other country, and I might be, I haven't gone through and surveyed them all, but certainly the US dollar versus New Zealand, Australian, UK pound, pretty sure the euro, and Asian currencies, we've all weakened against the US dollar. So you're 100% right. Realistically, actually the prices have gone up in some cases quite dramatically. And then we've got last year's chip in the iPhone 14, and I think that was always going to be a hard thing to time. If you're deciding to separate and to create a much clearer delineation between your base product, as it were, or your standard product and a higher end one, how you time that can make quite a difference. And by dropping out the iPhone 14 with last year's chip and trying to create this thing where basically if you want to have an iPhone where you can, and a lot of people will buy an iPhone because there's a little bit of status with it, right? Well, there's maybe not so much status if you don't have the Pro model now, and they've kind of delineated that a little bit more.
You've
right?
got this. Oh, have you got the 3 cameras on the back, or is it the 2 camera model? And everyone's judging you. So and look, when they bought this phone out, this is the 13, and they did that enormous jump with the price. I thought that's absolutely ridiculous. And then I bought one, and it's the best phone I've ever had. So
that's the flip side, isn't it?
That's the thing. It is sensational. The other thing is it's I've got a very tough case on it, which is just as well, but it's going to last. Whereas people who bought the other brand of phone around about that time, those phones have already got those dreaded pink lines. They're looking to replace them already. And, once you go Apple, it's pretty hard. But like we were talking about DJI, if they're selling 80% or now 50% of the drones in the world, and Apple's selling, a good percentage, and they're able to make a margin, good on them. If they make a great tool that lasts 3 years, you don't buy an iPhone every generation. The one that I bought is excellent. It's going to last another couple of years. So, I have no doubt that Apple is going to execute really well. When they talk about demand slowing, maybe there's a billion less or something, but the little product they forgot about, Apple TV, is a $1 billion business for them. So, and there's no marketing for that.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now I want to delve into Ambit. Maybe you can come forward just a little bit closer to the mic so everyone is fully hearing you, and maybe even in the shot a little bit there for those that are watching the video. So keen to get a bit of an update. It's been a little while since we've chatted around Ambit. Some folks won't be familiar with you at all. So fill us in. What's what's Ambit doing, and what have the last couple of years what have you gone through? Because it's been a crazy and a tough time for everybody in one way or another, and for startups and businesses actually just still being around as a success story in itself, right? How's it look?
Yeah, so good. So for those that don't know what we do, we have a platform on which you can create chatbots, and people will have heard of chatbots, right? It's the thing that sits at the bottom corner of your screen, and then you click on it and you ask it a few questions. And most people who've used them, the first one they might have used was probably Oscar from Air New Zealand, and they had a really good shot early on. In fact, I think they launched it 2016, 2017, very early in the ideas of creating chat to do customer service. And to give them some credit, it was brave, and I think they've served a lot of people. I use it quite a lot now. So things have evolved through that time. We launched in 2017, but we're 22 people now. So we've grown over that 5 years, a bit over 5 years. And we work with brands like Vector and Tower. We work with Noel Leeming, and we've just signed Torpedo 7, another great New Zealand brand owned by the Warehouse Group.
Yeah, that's good.
And what do we do for them? So we answer those really common questions, like where is my parcel, or when's my power coming back on, or hey, I've chipped my windscreen, can I get that replaced in the case of Tower? And what we do is we ensure that there's no wait time. You can get through a conversation very efficiently. You don't have to wait to talk to a person. There's no on hold music. You can get straight through. Now we deal with those high volume questions. If you've got something really sophisticated, we put you through to a person still through the same platform.
Yeah, which is good. But actually, the use case you're talking about, relevant to me on the weekend. I called. In my case, it was AA Insurance.
Yep.
and there was a smashed windscreen on a vehicle.
Yep.
Leave it parked on the street. Great.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, it's the weekend, Paul.
Yeah.
And this and that and so on. Oh, yeah, we'll get someone to call you back in a couple of days.
Yeah, which is not really good enough because.
And so what does the alternative sort of look like with
that's a
with a chatbot?
It's a great example, right? So the experience, if you were with one of the Lucky Tower customers, is that you go to the website, you open our chatbot, which is called Charlie, and you say, "Hey, I've cracked my windscreen," and it says, "Should we book that directly into Novus Glass for you?" You say, "Okay," and it will give you a date and time and an option to change it, and you're done. And it's probably going to take 3 minutes, and you could literally do it in the car, not while you're driving, of course, Paul. You wouldn't do that, but when you've stopped,
autonomous vehicle,
maybe. Yeah, if you've got that autopilot rock and rolling, then maybe you could do that. But that's the experience. And so what we generally found is that a 30-minute experience going through those typical discussions becomes a 3-minute experience. So the agent isn't required, but the agent isn't eliminated. What's happened there is the agent is available to someone who's got a really complex inquiry.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe there's been a couple of areas in New Zealand where there's been some flooding, and when there's flooding, flood damage and who's responsible for what, that might be a conversation with an insurance agent or even an assessor to help you work that out. So we deal with the high volume, but we've still got a human when it counts. And in fact, you get to talk to a human earlier because they're not on the phone answering questions like, how do I change my password? Or I need to update my address.
That's great, because when we do want to speak to somebody, when you do need to speak to somebody, you want to get through as quick as you can.
Yeah.
Now, is what you're doing, where does it play with voice? Because you've talked about chatbots and so on, and we've had these sort of IVR phone systems and menus we've gone through and so on. And there have been varying sort of elements of voice and so on. Where are you playing with, with that voice side and also, the video type,
the avatars and the like.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Virtual
so
humans
conversation,
and so on.
if you think of it, conversation is the brain of all of those things. So with we IVRs, some people have enjoyed it. I've always had good experiences. Some people have found it a little bit harder if they've got a different accent or something. But fundamentally, something has to power that. That's us. That's the conversation. So we can plug any kind of voice stack on top of it. It could be Google. It could be AWS. We work with them. It could be IBM, Microsoft. Any one of the big players has got the voice. The speaking.
Can you bring Darth Vader in as the
voice?
voice?
We can indeed. Yep. We don't even need James Earl Jones anymore. We can simulate that, and actually we can. So not only can we do that, but we can make it speak in the style of different things, like Darth Vader in the style of a pirate. We can do that. Don't know if that's useful, but it's the kind of thing people ask their Echo Dot, isn't it? So from there, yes, we can empower conversations. So will people be making? People say, can I call your system? Yes, we can give it a phone number today, and people can call, but it's actually a different problem. The question is, what are we doing then? You still need real phone lines. People are moving away from that to get into WhatsApp, moving into Messenger. Can we take digital calls? Yes, we can take those as well. So we don't solve the voice to text problem. We solve the text to understanding problem. Now you ask about avatars. So there's a couple of great New Zealand companies and quite a few companies overseas. We have this concept of a digital person or a digital human. Yes, so we can power that as well. In fact, we work with Unique with Noel Leeming. And if you go into their flagship store in Newmarket, you can see Nola, who can talk to you. And that's our brain, and it's the face and the actions from the New Zealand company Unique.
Yep. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I do still. I've found with that sort of technology, it's still on a journey, isn't it? I mean, it's not the same as having a person there, just in the same way that what Elon showed off, over the weekend is. There's still a journey before it's like, you can throw absolutely anything at it. But to your point of those, those key things, somebody comes up and, hey, what hours are you open? Or, what area the washing machine's in, or what have you, right? If it can do that, and it's kind of cool for a company like Noel Leeming that does sort of techie type stuff.
That's right.
To walk in and to have this digital human face there, wanting to interact with you.
That's right.
Or,
and you get more from it than just the directions on where to go buy an iPhone, right? You go there, you have a bit of a discussion with it, you talk with one of the people who walks up, you get great engagement, and then they can take you around the store. And we haven't got the numbers so much. We know the return on investment that you can generate with these kind of systems, but the fact is you generate interest in a technology company, and Noel Leeming wants to be, and I think it is really a leader in that technology space, that they supply a very large amount of that high-tech equipment. My phone, my laptop, just about everything came from Noel Leeming, and it's good to support them, but it's been that engaging process that we've been able to have. So yes, we can power those. We're mentioning it actually into car and automation. The car companies themselves, BMW and Mercedes, big investors in the space. They can see there's a lot happening. Sometimes it's the visual side, sometimes it's the text and verbal side, sometimes it's the actual conversation. But lots happening in this space when you've got those companies who are realizing they're not just car companies, they're automotive or they're motion and transport technology companies. There's lots of ways you can achieve that.
Cool. And you've just been at SaaStr, which is the big the big annual event. I'm not sure what's happened over the last couple of years with SaaStr, but a lot of New Zealand and Australian software as a service folks representing those firms down under at SaaStr. Any sort of particular highlights from this year?
Oh, look, the highlights for me, just about everything I end up doing is all about people. So one of the great things was that because things are kind of recovering from the spicy flu that we've had for the last couple of years, there wasn't much centralized organization. So it really was just a handful of Kiwis and Aussies started talking. Before you knew it, we had about 100 people on a WhatsApp list, and we're all sending messages. We ended up getting a bit of sponsorship, and ASX and AWS came to the party, and the New Zealand and Australian Trade Commissions all got part of it. And we brought together about 100 or 120 people the night before the conference. So that for me was a real highlight. And then we wore some similar clothing, which made sure that we were recognizable at the thing, and had this response everywhere we went. Oh, there's so many Kiwis and Aussies here. And if there's one thing I love about what's happened over this last couple of pandemic years, I think this kind of negativity between New Zealand and Australia has really evaporated, and I think that's a wonderful thing. I've always been very positive about two countries that are, not physically, but socially and culturally very, very close. And it was just that we were one big positive family while we were over there. And some of the best business we did was actually between the companies themselves. So that was cool. Fabulous.
That's awesome.
Now, then the other learnings from the conference. Now, one thing for listeners to note, it's not a sales conference. You don't go there and sell your XYZ. I mean, you could, but the main thing is you go to learn and get inspiration. It's founder heavy, so lots of founders of companies. I mean, the founder of MailChimp, who sold his company for $12 billion with no funding, was there. The founders of HubSpot, one of the biggest successes in the SaaS world recently, were there, and many, many others, right? In fact, the person who runs SaaStr, Jason Lemkin, he started EchoSign, sold to Adobe for $400 million. These are impressive numbers, incredibly inspiring, and that's what took me there. So lots of great people. But for the first time in that kind of environment, everyone was talking about efficiency. If you raise money, it's going to be less at a lower valuation, and you've got to do more with it. So as we were talking about before the show, you're not going to get that $10,000 employee welcome pack with all the goodies and the unlimited Uber Eats for a year. It's going to slim down to a t-shirt or two. And so people are talking capital efficiency, and this is where I think New Zealand and Australian firms have got an opportunity, because we've always run like that. Because investors here are really, really tough. They keep us. I'm 5 years in to this, and we're still running on a pretty lean budget. Right. So investors keep us definitely on our efficiency toes. So we're used to this. New Zealanders are very good at running companies like this, and you see, various people. We've had some very senior people in General Motors, in Microsoft, in Facebook, etc. We're good at being very practical and stretching a lot of money out of a very few dollars. So it was kind of recognition that we're doing well. I hope we get it. When funding returns, I hope that some of it comes down and looks down at companies in this part of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's very cool. Well, great to catch up, Tim. We'll have to make sure it's not quite so long between drinks.
Absolutely.
Next time around.
Yeah, and less pandemics in between.
Yeah, let's cut back on those.
Okay.
So
that's a deal. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. Thanks everyone for listening in, and we'll look forward to catching you again next week. Thank you, of course, to our show partners, Vodafone, 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, Gorilla Technology, and Deal. And of course, if you're catching the live stream, make sure you subscribe through your favorite podcast app so you can catch each episode. And if you're listening to the audio, then you can catch the live videos most weeks. Follow me on LinkedIn is probably the easiest one. It tends to alert well, or whatever else you listen to sort of catch live video on. And you need to, if it's YouTube, you need to hit the bell. In fact, I think you can do something. You can do something similar in Facebook and in LinkedIn as well to get alerted to those live streams. And also the live streams usually on Twitter. So a few places where you can catch those. Tim, where's the best place for people to get in touch if they want to connect with you?
LinkedIn's definitely the best place for us. I'm all over LinkedIn. I'm the guy in orange.
Tim Warren, LinkedIn, there you go.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Catch you next week. See ya.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.